In a few hours, they'll escort me to the courthouse for yet another day of trial. 527 days. That's how long I've been behind bars, accused of a crime I didn't commit. The media has already convicted me. The community I once served now sees me as a monster. But I'm not. I'm just a man trapped in a corrupt justice system desperate for answers. Today, I want to share my story with you. I'll walk you through every piece of evidence the police claim they have against me, every witness statement they say puts me at the scene, and why they think I killed those poor girls. By the end of this video, you can decide for yourself. Am I really the monster they paint me to be, or am I just another victim of a broken system?
The trial of Richard Allen stands as one of the most controversial developments in the infamous Delphi murders. A man who lived and worked in plain sight for over 5 years after the crimes, now sitting in a courtroom fighting for his life. But before we delve into his story, we must remember that at the heart of this case lies an unimaginable tragedy: the deaths of 2 innocent teenagers, Abigail Williams and Libby German.
February 13th, 2017. That date changed everything, not just for the families of those girls, but for our entire community. I remember that day clearly because I was there, walking the trails like I often did. The police know this because I told them back in 2017 when they first interviewed me. I had nothing to hide then, and I have nothing to hide now. I knew about all of this throughout the news. It was unseasonably warm for Indiana, around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 young girls, Abigail Williams, 13, and Libby German, 14, were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge Trail around 1:35 p.m. They say Libby's older sister Kelsey was the one who dropped them off. Just teenage best friends going for a hike, taking photos, enjoying their day off school. I remember reading Libby had posted a photo on Snapchat at 2:07 p.m. showing Abby walking along the bridge. That was the last time anyone heard from them. They were supposed to meet Libby's father at 3:15 p.m., but they never showed up. The family searched first. That's what you do in a small town like Delphi. You look out for each other's kids. They called the police around 5:30 p.m. when they couldn't find the girls.
Even now, 7 years later, the timeline of events from that February afternoon continues to haunt the community of Delphi.
I remember the next day's headlines clearly. They found the girls around noon, about half a mile east of the bridge on the north bank of Deer Creek. The details that have been coming out so far in the trial, I can barely bring myself to repeat them. The prosecution claims both girls had their throat. They say there were tree branches placed on their bodies in strange patterns. Patterns my defense team is trying to connect to something else entirely. But what caught everyone's attention was what Libby had captured on her phone. The media called her a hero for having the presence of mind to record what was happening. A man on the bridge walking toward them. A voice saying, "Down the hill." That grainy image, that audio clip. They've been played countless times on every news channel in America. And now they're saying that man was me, the one they called Bridge Guy. But do you know how many men in Delphi match that description? Caucasian, 5'6" to 5'10", 180 to 200 pounds, wearing blue jeans and a blue jacket. Half the men in town fit that description on any given winter day. The investigation dragged on for years. I followed it like everyone else in Delphi did. How could you not? These were our girls. 2 sketches were released. One in 2017, another in 2019, looking nothing like each other. They investigated a man who died by suicide in 2019. They looked into some social media account called Anthony Shots that was supposedly catfishing young girls. They even searched Ron Logan's property, the owner of the land where the bodies were found. He died in 2020, never charged with anything.
The investigation into the Delphi murders spanned over 5 years, generating over 50,000 tips and multiple persons of interest before Richard Allen's arrest in October 2022. But what led investigators to focus on this local pharmacy technician after all these years?
October 26, 2022. That's the day my world collapsed. The day they arrested me. A regular guy who worked at CVS who processed photos for these girls' families, who lived just minutes from the trail. They say the killer was hiding in plain sight all along, but what if they're wrong? What if the easiest answer isn't the right one? Let me tell you how they built their case against me, piece by piece. It's important you understand how a normal life can suddenly become a nightmare based on what the police call evidence. It started with that bullet, a single unspent .40 caliber round they say they found between the girls' bodies. They claim it came from my Sig Sauer model P226, a gun I've legally owned since 2001. And yes, I owned a Sig Sauer that matched that caliber. Yes, I was the only one with access to it. But here's what they don't tell you. .40 caliber rounds are one of the most common types of ammunition in America. Sure, ballistics testing matched it to my firearm, but here's what doesn't add up. They found this bullet less than 2 feet from one of the victims, yet there are no photographs documenting exactly where it was found. No pictures of the ground after they removed it, nothing. My defense team calls it the magic bullet because it seems to have appeared out of nowhere. My original defense team was building a strong case around these inconsistencies, but then something strange happened.
In a shocking development in October 2023, Judge Francis Gull removed Allen's defense attorneys, citing gross negligence due to leaked crime scene photos. The Indiana Supreme Court later reinstated them, but the incident raised serious questions about the handling of the case.
Then there's the video from Libby's phone. They showed it in court on the 4th day of my trial. 35 to 40 seconds that they claim seal my fate. The prosecution says you can see me walking on that bridge following the girls. But have you seen that video? It's so grainy you can barely make out any features. They enhanced it, cleaned it up, adjusted the contrast. But at the end of the day, it's still just a blurry figure in a blue jacket and jeans. Again, any men in town fit that description on any given day. What really bothers me is how they handled my 2017 interview. Yes, I told them I was on the trail that day. I had nothing to hide. I told them I was there for about 2 hours, that I saw 3 females near the bridge. Why would a killer voluntarily place himself at the crime scene? They interviewed me again in October 2022, right before my arrest. I told them the same thing. I was wearing jeans and a black or blue jacket watching fish from the bridge. They turned my honesty against me.
The significance of Allen's 2017 interview has become a crucial point of contention. While prosecutors view his admission to being on the trail as incriminating, defense attorneys argue it shows transparency inconsistent with guilt.
They claim that there were people who saw what I did, but these witnesses, they waited 5 years to come forward. Bran Wilbur says she saw me walking with purpose on the trail. Rayleigh Voorhees claims she passed someone who didn't seem to be a happy person. Betsy Blair described seeing someone with brown, poofy hair who looked boyish. Another woman claims she saw a muddy and bloody man walking away from the area. Their descriptions don't even match each other, let alone match me exactly. And remember, they're recalling memories from 2017 after seeing my face plastered all over the news in 2022. Think about it. These witnesses came forward after seeing my photo splashed across every news channel in Indiana. After 5 years of looking at police sketches and that grainy video, how can anyone be sure their memories haven't been influenced by all that exposure?
Studies have consistently shown that eyewitness identification becomes less reliable as time passes. The phenomenon known as memory contamination can occur when witnesses are exposed to media coverage and public discussion of a case. Allen is right, at least in this regard. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable, especially when there's pressure to find a suspect.
Don't get me wrong, what happened to those girls is awful. But why am I the one locked up in this cell? Because the police desperately wanted someone to blame. And here's what really led to my arrest: my car. Someone remembered seeing a vehicle parked oddly near the trails as if trying to hide its license plate. 5 years later, they matched that description to a car I owned in 2017. Think about that. A vague memory of a parked car, 5 years after the fact. They claim I confessed while in jail. They say I admitted to the murder 7 times during a phone call with my wife in April 2023. But they won't let you hear the context of those supposed confessions. They won't tell you about my mental state after months in isolation, about the medication I was on, about the pressure I was under.
False confessions are more common than many realize. Factors such as mental stress, isolation, and psychological pressure can lead individuals to make statements that aren't true. Studies show that approximately 25% of DNA exoneration cases involved false confessions.
I spent months in isolation. My wife had gone into hiding because of death threats. I couldn't sleep. The lights in my cell were always on. The constant noise, the stress, the uncertainty. It does something to your mind. They had me on medication. Some days I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I was isolated, desperate, confused. Whatever I might have said during that time, that wasn't me. That was a broken man trying to make sense of a nightmare. Do you know what it's like to be told over and over that you're guilty? To have everyone, the guards, the investigators, the media, treat you like a monster? Eventually, you start to question your own memories. You think, maybe I did something and blocked it out. Maybe they're right. My defense team tried to explain this. They argued that my mental state had deteriorated significantly in jail. Did you know I was put on suicide watch? That I was in a state of psychosis? But the prosecution doesn't want to talk about that. They just want to focus on words allegedly spoken during my darkest moments. Now, there's another aspect to this case that my defense team wanted to explore, something the judge won't allow the jury to hear about. Have you ever heard of Odinism?
Odinism, also known as Asatru or Norse paganism, represents a complex religious movement with deep historical roots. At its core, it's the modern revival of pre-Christian Norse religious practices, centering around gods like Odin, Thor, and Freya. Traditional Asatru focuses on ancient Norse values such as honor, loyalty, and connection to nature. However, what began as a legitimate spiritual practice has been twisted by certain groups for darker purposes. Since the 1960s, some white nationalist organizations have corrupted these ancient beliefs, transforming religious symbols and rituals into tools for extremism. This corrupted version of Odinism has been linked to various hate groups and, in some cases, violent crimes.
My defense team discovered evidence suggesting the crime scene had ritualistic elements. Tree branches arranged in specific patterns, marks in blood that aligned with pagan symbols. They identified several known Odinists in the area with violent histories. But Judge Gull ruled all of this inadmissible. The judge won't let the jury hear any of this. They can't learn about the other unsolved crimes in the region with similar patterns. They can't hear about the known Odinist gathering places just miles from where the girls were found. They can't consider that maybe, just maybe, there's another explanation for what happened that day. Why? If there's even a chance that someone else committed these murders, shouldn't the jury hear about it?
The defense's Odinist theory represents one of the most controversial aspects of this case. While many dismiss it as a desperate attempt to create reasonable doubt, others point to similar cases where religious cult activities were initially dismissed, only to later prove significant.
You know what's ironic? I processed photos for the Patty family at CVS. I lived less than 5 minutes from the trail. If I really were the killer, would I have stayed in Delphi, worked in public, helped the victims' families? The prosecution says I was hiding in plain sight, but maybe, just maybe, I was in plain sight because I had nothing to hide. As I sit here in my cell, I think about Abby and Libby every day. They deserve justice. Their families deserve closure. But rushing to judgment, ignoring alternative theories, and condemning a man based on circumstantial evidence, that's not justice. Next week, I'll know my fate. 12 jurors will decide if I spend the rest of my life in prison. They'll weigh the evidence. A bullet that wasn't properly documented. Witnesses whose memories have been shaped by years of media coverage. Confessions made during mental distress. And a video so grainy that it could be almost anyone. I know what the public thinks. I've read the headlines, seen the protests outside the courthouse. But I ask you, after hearing my side of the story, after considering all the problems with the evidence against me, are you still so sure?
Our thoughts and prayers remain with the families of Abigail Williams and Libby German, who have endured 7 years of uncertainty and grief. Whatever the outcome of this trial, Their loss remains an enduring tragedy that has forever changed the community of Delphi, Indiana.